All right, let's get into the news then. Our top story this week, Anthony Taylor is at it once again. Yellow cards galore in Chelsea versus Bournemouth, a new record for a number of yellow cards in a Premier League match. What an utterly bizarre affair it was.
Well done, Anthony Taylor. He's broken another record yet again. He did an interesting job. It is a bizarre record to have. It was a bizarre game for it to happen in as well. You wouldn't really think that Bournemouth-Chelsea would be the type of game that would it be kicking off in, but equally the standing record was Tottenham-Sheffield United. So maybe it is the games that don't feel like they're going to get nasty, where the referee decides to book everyone.
Well, it's strange because there wasn't a feistiness about the game. There wasn't an aggressiveness. I guess you could say that games like, if you were to say what is the game that has the most yellow cards, instantly would spring to mind as stuff like the Battle of the Bridge. But the difference there is once a few yellow and reds have been handed out, people will have to tone it down because they know what's happening. But because Chelsea Bournemouth wasn't feisty, they were just completely stupid yellow cards that then frustrated people, and then they reacted to that. But there was nothing in there that, that should have been huge amounts of yellow cards. The fact that it was 6 to Chelsea, 8 to Bournemouth, absolutely ridiculous. Just to sort of talk about the game first, though, and then we'll break down all the yellow cards and all of that shenanigans. Talk about the game first. Chelsea didn't play particularly well.
No.
I think for a lot of Chelsea fans, they will be very relieved that Chelsea won this match, but ultimately the performance probably wasn't where they would want it. However, over the last few years, they have been accustomed to Chelsea losing games they should have won. So it's kind of nice to have the shoe on the other foot for a change.
Yeah, I think what the main thing is it does show a step. Weirdly, it showed a step in the right direction for Chelsea. A game, even the best teams have bad games, but the difference is they win those games. For Chelsea, when they have a bad game, they usually lose pretty badly. The fact they were up against it and they still got the win across the line shows that there is a difference from Chelsea this season and last season. Because I do think that last season Chelsea would have lost that game pretty badly to Bournemouth. Bournemouth had a lot of chances. Tavernier hit the bar. Robert Sanchez deserves all the plaudits he got. He was brilliant in Chelsea net.
Yeah.
And the penalty save was quite good. But Bournemouth will be thinking, how do they not come away from that game with at least a point? But yeah, Chelsea, very different. The fact they managed to win, despite the fact they were up against it for most of the game, despite the fact the performance was terrible, I think it shows a positive step.
Yeah, definitely. Could you also say there Chelsea last season would have lost it? Would Bournemouth last season have won that match?
Potentially.
Is there a difference now in the Bournemouth level?
Yeah, maybe so. But I Bournemouth will wonder why. Again, I think it's a very controversial thing. They gave the penalty to Evan Nilsson because he hasn't scored yet. He then goes and misses it. It does. That's kind of the reverse effect they were hoping that it was going to have. But Bournemouth, they had so many chances. Robert Sanchez put in a brilliant shift, but realistically, Bournemouth should have scored at least one goal in that game.
Yeah, the penalty miss probably puts more pressure on than it relieves, and that would have been the aim of giving him that penalty. Jadon Sancho, what a magnificent debut, looked really exciting to watch. How does this Chelsea attack look for you? Because we saw in this game, João Felix, Jadon Sancho, Christopher Nkunku come off the bench. Is that a very positive thing? Or is this going to create squad issues?
It's interesting, isn't it? Because as you say, it wasn't working for Chelsea. Sancho and Nkunku come on, and one of them gets the assist that leads to the goal for the other one. And I think it definitely causes a problem for Maresca, because who do you start now? Do you reward fine form, or do you pick the players that have been playing week in, week out, and then that on their day, because players like Jackson has had a decent start to the season, but Nkunku comes on and scores against Bournemouth, so who do you give the start to? I think Jadon Sancho, hats off to him, to be honest. Yeah, he looked brilliant. The fact he got man of the match and he only played 45 minutes looked really positive. I think if there was to be any changes in the front four, Sancho for Neto would be the one that I would expect to see, because I didn't really think Pedro Neto got involved. Sancho came on and dropped a man of the match performance, and it was, I think, just and I think everyone will agree, it was just brilliant to see Jadon Sancho back out on the pitch playing really well and clearly enjoying himself playing football once again.
Yeah, we saw it in spells at Borussia Dortmund. There just wasn't that consistency. And personally, with the whole thing of having two elite players in each position, top clubs have that. If you look at Manchester City or Liverpool when they won titles, even if you look at Arsenal now, though that's not quite the same because they just refuse to buy any other right wingers, But if you look at their squads, they've got 2 quality players in each position. So I don't really have an issue with Chelsea doing that. The issue for Chelsea is that the players in question are only top class if you consider their best performances. But too often these players are inconsistent or out of form, or we've not seen them yet because they've only been there 3 weeks. It's just really hard to gauge right now, because how do you say that Noni Madueke should be dropped when he scored a hat-trick 2 weeks ago? How do you say that Jadon Sancho should be dropped when he's just scored a goal? How can you possibly drop Cole Palmer?
Yeah.
He's the best player in the team. And so suddenly it becomes very difficult to manage those minutes effectively, because you want to bed in Pedro Neto, because you want to give Mudryk opportunities to shine, because you want Jackson to start playing well, but then Nkunku scored here. So it does create those difficulties. But would I rather have that or a situation where Chelsea are looking at their bench and Raheem Sterling sat there? Like, for me, that is a no-brainer. So I think, yes, the situation can create squad harmony issues, but in terms of out-and-out quality, in terms of options for Maresca, I don't see an issue. If Chelsea could get Champions League football or even Europa League football for next season, they would have a squad that's ready to compete in that, if the players there can start to perform more consistently. So it's an exciting time. Let's have a look through all of the yellow cards then for Anthony Taylor. We're going to start in the 18th minute when Ryan Christie was booked for a late challenge on Palmer. First foul of the game for Christie. So it's a little bit harsh. It could have. I think you can make an argument for yellow, but it was the first foul of the game. Yeah,
it was an unnecessary yellow. For me, like, I mean, I understand what, I'm not saying Taylor was wrong to give a yellow, but it just feels unnecessary. By giving a yellow there, you're ramping up a game that hasn't really got anything to it, and it just felt like a bit. It didn't need to be a yellow, really.
Yeah, and then we had Fofana get a yellow in the 31st minute, the first one for Chelsea. That was another foul. It was his first foul of the game. In fact, Chelsea made 9 fouls in the match and received 6 yellow cards.
Wow.
It is truly bizarre, the number of yellow cards that were given out.
Yeah, I mean, Aussie, as we'll get into, a lot of them were for dissent, but it was just a mess.
Well, the penalty altercation saw 4 yellow cards handed out. Lewis Cook was the first. Why he was involved, I'm not sure. Then we saw Mark Cucurella get booked. Then he eventually got round to booking Robert Sanchez for, of course, the penalty foul. And then Adam Smith got booked for fighting Cucurella. I mean, I get the dissent rules are coming in now to try and prevent players from abusing the referee, in the sense that they go up and shout in his face and try and force him to change his decision. But sometimes it is just a little bit ridiculous. We've already seen Declan Rice with kicking the ball away, how that was a bit of a weird one. And then we've seen a lack of consistency because Szoboszlai did the same thing this weekend, and it wasn't penalised. So it's just, again, it's the issue with consistency. Because if we're going to see 14 yellow cards in every match, then I guess that's what we're going to see. But as long as it's applied consistently, I think that's what people want. Equally, I don't think many of these fouls are yellow cards.
No, it's... I struggle. I get where obviously the dissent is, but realistically, like, if players go, for example, those 2 yellows there for Cucurella and Adam Smith getting involved with each other, I mean that's just needless from those. I mean, Cucurella was another one. He had a mental game. I don't know. He was just going around causing chaos everywhere, and I think that didn't help.
Cucurella does. Yeah. I couldn't really describe his role. It felt a little bit like Rico Lewis. He was playing in that left half space, and actually once Sancho came on, those two combined, like, that worked really nicely. But other than that, he was just sort of everywhere. Yeah. So I didn't really know what we were doing there. But that was interesting to see, at least. Taylor kept his cards in the pocket for the rest of the half from the 37th minute, so that was good. But 7 minutes into the second half, he was at it again with Nicholas Jackson picking up a yellow card. Then the 57th minute, when Colwill made a challenge on Semenyo, got booked, and then turns around and gives Jadon Sancho a yellow card for complaining.
That one was the best one because it was just brilliant. Colwill won the ball, and Chelsea came out of it with 2 yellow cards and conceding a free kick. And that's where the thing is, and this is where you go. I mean, this is where the problem is with it is that Taylor's in the wrong because Colwill hasn't fouled him. So the Colwill yellow is wrong. The Sancho yellow, however, I get that one because Sancho, yes, he's annoyed at the decision, and he rightfully is because it's the wrong decision. It's the way, he shouldn't do that. So the Sancho yellow is right, but if Taylor gets if he gets the Colwill tackle right, then you completely avoid those 2 yellow cards. One wrong decision brought 2 yellow cards there, and then it makes the decision look so much worse. But that one topped it off for me because Colwill makes a brilliant tackle, Taylor gives a free kick, then books them both.
Yeah, he is an interesting referee. But the other thing is, he has done 2 Chelsea games in 4 matches, which no other Premier League referee has had this season.
Yeah.
And I just don't understand it when there is such an evident issue with Taylor refereeing Chelsea games. And it's evident to even neutrals now. Because whenever he referees a Chelsea game, something ridiculous happens. Whether it's red cards that should never be red cards, whether it's weird goals, whether it's stuff, all those sorts of odd decisions, or whether it's handing out 14 yellow cards in 90 minutes, it's always something strange. Just for the hour mark, Cliver got yellow for stopping a Chelsea attack. I think you can probably say that was a fair yellow. He kept his cards in the pocket then until the 80th minute when Senesi got booked for a challenge on João Felix.
Yes.
I think that was probably fair again. Then Vega got a yellow card for celebrating the goal by jumping into the crowd, which I get it's in the rules, but what a stupid rule.
I mean,
I get you want to keep the game going, and obviously players delaying that, it's frustrating. But what a stupid rule.
It is a weird one. But I mean, Vega was loving life. I mean, watching him jump into that crowd was amusing.
Someone who's sort of unexpectedly become a cult hero at Chelsea.
Yeah.
He's built a really strong connection already with the fans. I think especially in this moment, a lot of Chelsea fans saw that and realised he had heart. And that's what I think a lot of this Chelsea project at the moment is missing. It feels very corporate, very callous, because you've got players who have represented the club from a young age being dropped for players who have never, it's their first season, who are unproven, who the fans can't really believe in and get behind. So I think that Renato Vega in that moment becomes sort of a beacon of hope in a sense. He became someone that Chelsea fans can look at and say, you know what, there are players here who care. And I think in that regard, that worked out really nicely. João Felix, yellow card for pulling down Scott in the 91st minute. And then Semenyo picked up the record-breaking 14th yellow card in the 96th minute.
Yeah, it was one hell of a game. I think what even makes it even funnier, is that there was an argument for both Cook and Cucurella to be sent off. They both made tackles while on a yellow card that on another day, another referee probably would have sent them both off for. So it's one of those. He kept booking everyone, but there were probably 2 times where 2 players could have been sent off for a second yellow card, and he didn't. So it was one of those. But I mean, one hell of a game.
The thing for me with Taylor is I don't understand how he can be so consistently poor at his job, especially with with a specific scenario. Because if it was a ref who he's a little bit lenient, or he's a little bit harsh, and he applies that to all the games, and that's going to happen, then I think that's okay, because the ref is going to ref the game by how he interprets the rules. However, when it's such a clear and obvious pattern, where it's every single time he referees Chelsea, why are the FA not questioning that?
Yeah.
Why are the FA not going, actually, we probably shouldn't have him on every Chelsea game?
Yeah.
Well, not the FA, actually, because that's the wrong person to direct that. PGMOL, sort it out, because he shouldn't be on every Chelsea match.
And I mean, I think I saw somewhere he's one of the only active referees that has refereed 2 FA Cup finals. Both of them had Chelsea involved. Yeah. I mean, it's just bizarre. It's very rare that a referee will do more than 1 FA Cup final. The fact he's done 2 and they both involve the same team, it's just weird. Like it's weird. It just keeps totaling up. It keeps adding up more to the crazy scenario. Anthony Taylor versus Chelsea.
Indeed. Anyway, from the game, Bournemouth slipping to 11th in the table, Chelsea rising to 7th. When I see Chelsea's position in the table, it frustrates me even more that they didn't see the Palace game out, because win that and they're 5th in the league and they're joint on points to Liverpool, who a lot of people until this game week were saying were strong title fighters. So I think there's a lot of frustration there. But we'll get to Liverpool in a moment. Let's transition to another place where it was all yellow and Derby Day in North London, because in the first half, Jared Gillett saw Anthony Taylor did and continued the theme. 7 yellow cards in the first 45 minutes. Luckily, he only had to hand out 1 in the second half, but bizarre.
I don't understand that.
Strange weekend.
Because that quite literally shows an inconsistency from the referee between the first and second half. And this is the problem. How can you hand out 7 yellows in one half and only hand out 1 in the other?
I will say I thought the second half was a lot more dominant from Arsenal. So in that regard, because the ball wasn't transitioning as quickly, there wasn't as many opportunities. Because a lot of fouls happen when the team is breaking. You have to make a lunge challenge, or you want to knock a player off the ball and you go over that line. I think in the second half, because Arsenal was so much better and Tottenham were very limp in attack, were very open at the back, I think that meant the game was very different on a whole. So I can sort of understand that, but still 7 yellow cards in the first half is utterly ridiculous. So yeah, it's a strange one. On the game then, I want to talk about the build-up to the match, because there was this weird media narrative that Arsenal were going through an injury crisis and that everything was going to fall apart. They missed two first-team players, one through injury. Like, I get that Rice and Odegaard are pretty key players, but Rice will be back next week and Odegaard's injury is only minor, and yet Arsenal fans and a lot of the media are acting like they've been really hard done by these injuries.
Yeah, it is a weird one. I think even though they have got a few players out, it's one of those.
Jesus is the other one, but he's never.
Yeah,
doesn't.
I think everyone has got, every football team to us in the Premier League has a few players out. If you go to every club, they've got injuries. So it was a bit of a weird one. I think, I was surprised. It felt like it was like, I don't know why, but it felt like Arsenal fans were already coming up with reasons why they were going to lose before the game had even kicked off. Perhaps there was a sense of worry that Arsenal could slip up, but I don't know. I don't really know where it came from.
You always want to present your team as the underdogs. And I think the media want to do that as well, because they are the underdogs in the whole scope of the title race, because City are this big behemoth who win every league and ruin everyone's fun. Arsenal are these plucky underdogs, which is bizarre in of itself, because Arsenal have spent a lot of money in recent seasons. In the last few years, it's been a parallel to City, and I know it's different because City's money is pumped in from the UAE and Arsenal's isn't, but still, I think it's interesting to see that narrative in the media. But I think this game should have been presented in a different light, in that this was going to be a really interesting contest, because Arsenal, yes, they had a couple of players light in midfield, but are looking very strong this season, but they did slip up against Brighton in what was a bit of a weird game. Tottenham are looking to prove themselves further. They've had a bit of a rocky start to the campaign, but the North London derby at home is a chance to really get the players up for it. So Solanke was back to start. I think there's a lot of things to be positive about. The media in the build-up was a little bit weird. In the actual game, I think Arsenal showed why they're in the title race. In the first half, Tottenham probably should have scored. I thought they had a few opportunities they might have done more with, and I think they played quite well. In the second half, though, Arsenal really, they scored that goal, of course, later in the game, but they really locked down the defence. And I think there isn't really an argument anymore. They have the best defence in the league. Defensively, they are incredible. The fact that last season they conceded so many fewer goals than Manchester City. The fact this season they've only conceded one in the first four. And I know Liverpool have done the same, but Liverpool have played some really poor opponents, I think. Granted, Manchester United are not a really difficult game. The only time they've conceded was most recently to Forest. So, I think Arsenal will be very proud of what they've done in defensive areas, and I think that was where Tottenham really struggled, especially considering their attackers didn't really know how to break that down. I thought that Dominic Solanke proved once again he's very one-dimensional. If you can get him to use his physicality against defenders, he's very imposing and he can be very threatening. But against Gabriel Magalhaes and William Saliba, that wasn't going to be an issue. So I think in that regard, they weren't able to utilise Solanke's strengths. So that was a bit of a weird one, and I think that for the money they spent for Solanke, for him to be so one-dimensional, is a little bit of an issue.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of question marks around Tottenham at the moment. Obviously, Postecoglou has this whole thing where he always wins something his second season, but for me, I think they look miles off winning anything, really. They've had a tough start to the season. I think drawing to Leicester in the opening weekend really set their season off on the wrong foot. That was a terrible way to start the season. To be honest, they nearly lost that game, and they probably should have lost that game. But, I think that they really need to get going soon. As overall in the game, as North London derbies go, I don't think it's going to be remembered for in a while. It was one of those where it didn't really live up to the derby day thriller. It's going to be a brilliant game, but the main thing, and I think that is because, as Arsenal showed, they are just one step too far for Tottenham at the moment.
There are a few steps, if I'm honest. I think if Arsenal had Rice, had Odegaard, had a bit more balance to their midfield, and really went for the kill, they probably could have got a few goals. But
maybe.
Yeah, I also singled out Solanke. I'd like to say the other Tottenham attackers didn't really offer much else. I thought Johnson had a particularly poor game. I don't think Son was on it, and I thought Wilson-Odobert looked really raw when he came on, which is a bit of a surprise. He played Premier League football last season. I just don't think he's what Tottenham needs.
I don't know where that signing came from. I don't know what they saw in him.
Well, it was a panic, wasn't it? They wanted Pedro Neto all window. Chelsea hijacked that deal, as they so famously love to do. And then, obviously, Tottenham were left at a bit of a crossroads, and they wanted someone for this season, but they didn't want to spend too much money, and they ended up on Wilson-Odobert, which, I don't know, they needed someone that would be able to come in and compete, and at 19 years old, he's not showing that ability just yet. Yeah. Maybe in 5 years' time, we'll be talking differently, but I just don't see it. I just don't see it at the moment with Wilson-Odobert. I think he's an okay player. I think there are some huge flaws there that need working on. It's not impossible, but I just don't see him being a top player. I think Brennan Johnson has much higher ceiling. He was very quiet in this game, though. Let's turn our attention over to Liverpool then, because I briefly, I mentioned in there a really disappointing result for them. They hadn't conceded in the league up to this point. Obviously, big win over Manchester United. Again, though, that's not really an accomplishment this season. And they beat Ipswich Town, who've just been promoted as well. They've not faced anyone of real high quality. Forest causing some surprises. They've not lost a game yet.
Yeah, I think I'm still shocked, to be honest. It's a bit like, where has this come from? Liverpool looked so comfortable in their first few games, and yes, they are easy opponents, but they still played really well. They still looked really sharp, and this result just came out of the blue. And I think, as you say, Forest are a really strange one at the moment. I can't really pin where Forest are, because 1 minute they look like a really good outfit and they could play some decent football and really climb the table, and the next they'll look like relegation fodder and they'll be at threat of going down. And it can't make sense, this Forest side. And I think, to be honest, I think everyone expected a very simple Liverpool win. I really do, and I'm still stunned as to where this result came from.
I mean, Liverpool just didn't really create any chances. Forest played some really good defensive football. Then, obviously, Hudson-Odoi found the breakthrough through what is now becoming his archetypal goal, cutting in on that right foot and drilling, floating it almost, finessing it, I guess you could say, into either the bottom or top right corner. It's a wonderful, low-driven effort this time. And he is very good at that type of goal. I think that Forest relied too heavily on individuals, but that can work when you are able to buy players like Alanga, like Hudson-Odoi, like Gibbs-White. On paper, they shouldn't be as high as they are, but they have got individuals, as I say, that can do that job. But I don't think any team that has Chris Wood as their starting striker should be right up there. But they have started the season very promisingly. 8 points from 4 matches. The table simply doesn't lie in that regard. 2 wins, 2 draws, 0 losses. They should be very pleased with their start to the season. As for Liverpool, it is a big slip up. I don't think they were going to be in the title race anyway, but it's a kind of game which they wouldn't have wanted to lose. It's a kind of game where they would have expected a routine victory, 12 from 12, and they're looking like they might fight for the title, even if they would eventually drop off anyway.
Yeah.
It's disappointing in that regard, and especially for people that have captained Salah in their FPL teams, it's really disappointing. But yeah, I don't think it's panic stations at all. I think there's always going to be slip ups with a new manager. Yeah, it's just disappointing. It's nothing for us, I think.
Liverpool got to move on. For Forest, keep this up, but the thing is, they'll probably go get battered in next week, and that'll be the problem. And that's where my problem with Forest is. But yeah, overall, a really bizarre result. Again, a wonder goal being the difference. Liverpool didn't really do too much wrong. They didn't do much right either. So they've just got to forget it. They've started the season pretty well. It is a big slip up, but overall, they go again, and they've got to keep building this form under the new manager. You expect there's going to be problems. They've just got to get over them.
Yeah, let's turn our attention then to one more game this week, and then we'll look at the full table and discuss our takeaways from it so far. Everton. What is wrong with Everton? They were 2-0 up once again today, and they lost 3-2 to Aston Villa. They were 2-0 up against Watford, and they lost 3-2, with 3 goals coming in like the last 10 minutes. They're just impressively shit. I don't understand it, and I'm sure there'll be Everton fans out there screaming the same stuff, because it is so frustrating to watch. McNeil in the 16th minute, Calvert-Lewin 27th minute, Everton are flying. What a start at Villa Park. The away fans are bouncing. Surely nothing can go wrong from here. Ollie Watkins scored and it was 2-1 at the break, but you're still thinking, you know what? Yes, it's going to be difficult to hold on in the second half, but surely they don't lose it. Watkins 58th, Duran 76th. Let's talk about the Duran goal because incredible goal.
Yeah, a brilliant strike. I keep seeing Martinez's reaction to it everywhere, but yeah, it was an incredible strike. No goalkeeper stands a chance saving a strike like that. It's one of those where you look at it and go, as a defence, you can't do anything about that really.
Yeah.
But the main question of Everton is, yes, the goal that made them lose the game, they couldn't have done much about. But overall, just how are you in that position? How have you allowed Villa to completely flip the game on its head? I do think the problem is if you take pre-match, if they'd lost to Villa, that's expected.
Yeah.
But it's just in the fashion that they lost. It's just shocking. No football team should do this. They got battered in game week 1, battered in game week 2, 4-0 and 3-0 losses, I think, or around there. Then the Bournemouth game was an absolute joke. That should never happen. I don't care. No football team in the world should lose a game like that. And then again at Aston Villa, what more is there to say about Everton? It's just not good enough. You cannot afford to let 2-goal leads slip in back-to-back games and expect to stay in the division.
Yeah, I think that's an interesting point. What would you put their troubles down to? Is it a mentality issue? Is it a morale issue? Is it a lack of tactical ingenuity from Dyche to not recognise what's changing? What would you put it down to? Is it a contribution of those factors?
I think it is. Yeah, I think you have to say it is. It's down to a bit of everything really. It's I think in the Brighton and Tottenham games they were really they just didn't get going. They might as well have not been there.
Yeah.
Dyche has shown no evidence that he wants to change things up. He wants to have another approach. I think the mentality is shocking because and that's the thing. As soon as they conceded that Bournemouth game, as soon as they conceded that goal, you could just tell that it wasn't going to end well. And then they went and conceded the second, and then the third. It is just one of those where Everton just seem to lose everything. As soon as it starts going wrong, it just falls apart. It's like when you take one block out in Jenga, you mess it up a little bit, and the whole tower falls down. I mean, Everton have got a lot of problems to sort out, but I worry for them because they need to sort them out quickly. If not, they're not going to stand a chance.
Yeah, I will say, obviously, Jared Branthwaite out injured to start the season. I know they shouldn't be relying on an individual, but he is a huge part of how successful their defence was last season. So I can understand somewhat. But yeah, it definitely feels like Everton have huge defensive issues. As for Aston Villa, it's been a weird start to the season for them because they've not looked comfortable in any of the games they've played, but they have won 3 from 4. The only game they lost was to Arsenal, who are in the title fight.
It's not bad.
It's difficult to say they've had a bad start, but they beat West Ham 2-1 in what was a really tight game that they could have gone either way there. Relied on a Duran goal at the end. They beat Aston Villa 2-1, Leicester 2-1, where they scored first, then they conceded again, then Duran scored, they conceded at the end. It was a bit nervy, but they just about saw it out, and they went 2-0 to Everton, but they won back 3-2, and they've won 3 matches now by that 1 goal margin. They've not been comfortable, but when you've got a side there's been a lot of movement in the window this summer. There's a lot of unknowns for Aston Villa that are just into Champions League football. When you're winning games that are edgy, that are nervy, it shows a lot about the character of the side and how strong they are. And I think a lot of people wrote off Villa this season because they simply just assumed that it would be similar to Newcastle. In that Newcastle would get Champions League football, have loads of injuries, and really struggle with that. I think a lot of people forgot that Aston Villa had European football last season and knew how to deal with that, and had a manager, Unai Emery, who knew how to handle that because he's been in that situation before where Eddie Howe simply hasn't. So I think in that regard, Aston Villa's performances could pretty much stay the same. Yeah, I know they beat Arsenal last season, and maybe on a different day they would have beaten Arsenal this season, the day that Ollie Watkins showed some scoring prowess. But yeah, I think, Villa doing very well, 5th in the table, pretty good stuff.
Yeah.
Let's look through the whole Premier League then. So that's the takeaways. At the moment, City top with 12, then Arsenal 2nd, Newcastle 3rd, both on 10 points. Liverpool in 4th on 9. Who would you say is currently in the title race? Is it just City or Arsenal, or does anyone else stand a chance?
I think it's very early days. It's very hard to tell. I think Liverpool,
Indeed, yeah.
Liverpool could still be in it if they really want to, and if they can deliver the performances, and if they can bounce back from this weekend. I think City and Arsenal will always be up there. I don't see Newcastle as being in that conversation really, and I think they will eventually, just fall away a little bit.
They're another one who've won every game by a 1-goal margin, apart from the Tottenham game apart from the Bournemouth game where they really should have done better.
Yeah.
And even Tottenham, they only won 2-1. I thought Tottenham were really bad in that match. So
Yeah.
they've not been convincing as yet. But again, it's similar to the Villa one where there's these nervy, edgy games and they are getting the right side of those results. And that can be the key difference at times. You look at sides like Chelsea and Manchester United who are in similar kind of games and don't always get those results over the line. So yeah, it's been interesting to see. Villa obviously in 5th place and you've got Brighton in 6th. Really good start for them under Fabian Herzler. Ipswich was a weird slip up, but what would you chalk that up to?
I think
complacency potentially.
Potentially they have started well. I think you have to give credit to Ipswich as well. They fought well. They set up well.
They defended very well.
Yeah.
I mean, 21 shots to 6 in favour of Brighton. Ipswich were just 1 shot on target in 90 minutes. They set up very well to play defensive football, and they did very well to hold on to that 0-0 draw. I think Brighton will be frustrated. I still think at times Welbeck isn't the striker they need. They could do with a Ferguson or someone like that, a little bit more penetrative, but they're doing really well. Forest in 7th, overachieving. I expect them to be closer to 14th, 15th, but they have had a really good start to the season. Brighton, Fulham, Chelsea, Palace, Leicester next 5. They're not horrible games. They could definitely get a good run of form, continue this good run of form. Then Chelsea in 8th. Okay start to the season. City was always going to be a loss. The Palace game was frustrating considering where they are in the table, but 7 points in 4 matches, it's not terrible for Chelsea. I think the only thing that is a little concerning is the number of goals they've conceded so far. 5 goals from 4 games, particularly the Wolves match where they scored 6, but they still conceded twice. I think there's a lot of defensive issues at the moment. Brentford's in 9th. I'm not really sure how they've got there. They've won 2, lost 2. I know a fine season so far. They beat Palace and Southampton. They lost to Liverpool and City.
Normal.
And that's exactly what you would expect from Brentford. So they've had a weird fixture so far. There's not been any close. Maybe Palace. You'd expect Palace based on last season to win, but there's been a lot of change at Palace this season. United in 10th. Huge overachievers. Obviously, they beat Fulham on the opening day. Got that late Xerxes goal. Brighton, obviously, they lost 2-1. Liverpool, they got back 3-0. And then they beat a 10-man Southampton. I'm less than convinced by Manchester United. Rashford's scoring is really good for him and for United, but I'm still not convinced by them.
Yeah.
Bournemouth 11th they're really missing Solanke, I think.
Yeah.
But they're still doing okay without him. And I think once Evan Nilsson gets up to the pace of the league, or Yanal comes back, either way, I think they'll be okay. Fulham in 12th. Weird start to the season for Fulham. They've just sort of been okay. In every, like United, they probably could have got a draw. A draw would have been a fair result. Against Leicester, they did well to win. Ipswich, a draw was a fair result. West Ham, a draw was a fair result. Yeah. Maybe they just could draw every game.
Maybe.
With occasional wins
that right,
in there. That's Fulham for you. Tottenham, really poor start to the season.
Yeah. They're in trouble.
Yeah, they haven't had a great start at all. They have a nice rest, and they get to play the EFL Cup this midweek, so it's an opportunity to see something different. Brentford, Manchester United, the 2 league games after that, with Europa League fixtures mixed in there, and then Brighton after that. It doesn't get easier for Tottenham. Really tough start to the season so far. And I know they played Newcastle and Arsenal, but drawing with Leicester was not okay. And the fact they didn't really compete with Newcastle or Arsenal, especially in the second half of those games, it doesn't bode particularly well. 14th, West Ham. I'm not hugely surprised.
No.
Changed their whole squad. They've had a bit of a tough fixture run so far. They lost to City and Villa. They beat Palace. They drew Fulham. I think all of those results are fine. They would have probably liked to beat Fulham, offer a bit more of a challenge, maybe draw with Villa, but not a terrible start to the season. Leicester in 15th. They would be really gutted not to win today. Or win this weekend. They probably could have beaten Crystal Palace. 92nd minute penalty. That would be a real kicker. But they've shown they can fight. And actually, without a points deduction now, they may actually be okay.
Yeah, hats off to them.
So they've started the season really well. 16th, Crystal Palace. I'm a bit worried about them. The 3-5-2 they tried to play against Leicester really didn't work. And they relied way too much on Mateta obviously getting those 2 goals. I think he looked really isolated up there, but obviously then he did score twice. So in that regard, he worked in his role. But I thought they looked very defensive, very deep. And actually, their 3-4-3 they played last season was much more effective and got much more out of Eze and Elise. And obviously, they've lost Elise, but still, big losses there. 17th, Ipswich Town. They'll be very happy to be above the relegation zone for as long as possible. 2 points so far. The draw against Brighton, good stuff. The draw against Fulham, good stuff. City and Liverpool, they're always going to lose.
Yeah.
They have done really well.
Yeah.
To draw games against Fulham and Brighton that they easily could have lost.
Yeah,
and Liverpool and City, they were never going to win.
No.
Southampton's a must-win coming up next. They've got there's no other way about that. They've got to win that game because they are a relegation rival. Then Wolves at 18th. I'm really worried about them again. They drew with Forest in somewhat fortuitous fashion. They lost to Arsenal. They were absolutely tanked by Chelsea. And they opened the scoring against Newcastle United and it fell apart the last 15 minutes. So, another one they'll be really frustrated about. Southampton in 19th.
Need to finish the game with 10 men.
Haven't got a point on the board.
11 men.
Everton in 20th haven't got a point on the board.
No.
They're the two at the moment I think are most likely to go down. They've just not shown any fight. Southampton scored 1 goal.
They've got more red cards than goals.
Yeah. Until this weekend, there was only 2.
Oh, no, they've had 1 red card, haven't they? But they need to stop being involved in games that have red cards. I mean, Jack Stevens, I don't know what he was doing. I can't describe what he tried to do against Man United. They missed that game. Yes, they lost 3-0, and yes, it's Man United, but they missed a penalty and got a red card. It's bizarre. Everton, I've got no more words about Everton. They're just terrible.
-9 goal difference. They've shipped 13 goals in 4 matches so far. That's obviously at least 3 a game in each of the games. Tottenham being the outlier there with that 4-0 win. It's really shocking. Yeah. It's genuinely really poor. I think Everton are in a lot of trouble. I think Southampton, I said that from the start of the season, would be in a lot of trouble, and they are. Yeah. But that is sort of the summary from this Premier League TFC news. Going forwards, these may feature other stories. This was sort of a cobbled together idea for something because we've not been happy with the videos recently. So cobbled together idea, but we will try and refine this to have more actual news stories from the week. Obviously, we had the internationals as well, which doesn't help because not a lot happened there. We can sit here and talk for 20 minutes about Lee Carsley not singing the national anthem, which is obviously a disgrace to the flag, and we're outraged. But just a Premier League special. Maybe going forward we'll talk about other stuff. But I hope you like the new series. Get involved in the comments below. Make sure to give all your thoughts and stuff like that. But thank you guys very, very much for watching, and we will see you next time.
See ya.